In the heart of 16th century London, the air hangs heavy with the scent of damp stone and political desperation. The crown of England, a golden circle of immense weight, sits not just upon a head, but upon a legacy of blood and betrayal. We begin our journey into the life of a woman who defied every expectation of her age. She was more than a monarch. She was a master of the courtly game, navigating a labyrinth of male ambition and silent threats. This is the story of how a young princess transformed into the legendary Virgin Queen, securing her place through sheer intellect and iron will. The corridors of Whitehall Palace are silent, yet they echo with the footsteps of those who wish to see the young queen fail. Elizabeth knows that her every move is scrutinized by the powerful men who surround her, men who believe a woman is too fragile for the rigors of statecraft. Her ascent to the throne was not a triumph of peace, but a survival of the fittest. Surrounded by seasoned courtiers and ambitious lords, she learns the art of the poker face, masking her fear behind a mask of regal indifference. The game has begun, and the stakes are nothing less than her life and the soul of her nation. Before she could rule the future, Elizabeth had to survive the ghosts of her past. Her father, the formidable Henry VIII, and her sister, the iron-willed Mary, left a legacy of religious turmoil and political instability. The court is a den of vipers, where a misplaced word can lead to the Tower of London. She studies the portraits of her ancestors, seeing the heavy price of power reflected in their stern gazes. To control the court, she must understand the machinery of fear that governed it before her arrival. Every alliance is fragile, and every smile hides a dagger of intent. In the dead of night, the Queen's private chambers become a hub of clandestine activity. Here, she meets with her most trusted advisor, William Cecil. They speak in hushed tones, their words barely audible over the crackling of the fireplace. The air is thick with the scent of melted wax and old ink. Cecil presents her with reports from every corner of the realm, detailing the movements of her enemies and the shifting loyalties of the nobility. This is the inner sanctum where the real work of ruling is done, far from the prying eyes of the public court and its performative gestures. Maps of a changing world are spread across the Queen's desk, their edges curled and stained with time. Elizabeth understands that England's power lies not just in its land, but in its ability to navigate the treacherous waters of international diplomacy. She examines the seals of foreign kings and the reports of her growing navy. Each document represents a choice: peace or war, alliance or isolation. The weight of these decisions is visible in the lines of her face, yet her resolve never wavers. She is the architect of her kingdom's destiny, weaving a web of influence that extends far beyond the English Channel. Tension reaches a breaking point during a formal session of the Privy Council. A powerful duke challenges the Queen's authority, his voice booming with the arrogance of centuries of tradition. He questions her judgment on matters of defense and religion, seeking to undermine her in front of her peers. Elizabeth does not shout. She does not flinch. Instead, she leans forward, her eyes fixed on his with a piercing intensity that silences the room. In this moment, the court witnesses the birth of a ruler who cannot be intimidated. She uses her intellect like a blade, carving through his arguments with surgical precision and cold logic. The question of succession haunts the palace like a persistent ghost. Foreign ambassadors arrive in a steady stream, bearing portraits of princes and promises of powerful unions. They see the Queen as a prize to be won, a means to secure English territory and influence. Elizabeth plays them all against each other, using the promise of her hand as a diplomatic weapon. She smiles at their flattery, but remains uncommitted, knowing that marriage would mean surrendering her hard-won autonomy. The court is a stage, and she is the lead actress, performing a dance of courtship that is purely political. Information is the currency of the Tudor court, and Elizabeth is the wealthiest player in the game. Her network of spies, led by the enigmatic Francis Walsingham, operates in the shadows, intercepting letters and infiltrating the households of her rivals. No secret is safe from her reach. We see the Queen reviewing intercepted correspondence, the wax seals broken and the contents laid bare. This invisible web of intelligence allows her to stay 3 steps ahead of any conspiracy. She understands that to control the court, she must know the hearts and minds of every person within it, and she uses that knowledge with ruthless efficiency. Religious divisions threaten to tear the country apart from within. The Queen must balance the demands of the radical reformers against the traditionalists who still harbor loyalty to Rome. Every Sunday is a performance of unity, yet the pews are filled with whispers of heresy and rebellion. Elizabeth navigates this minefield with a policy of not making windows into men's souls, demanding outward conformity while allowing for private belief. However, the threat of excommunication and foreign invasion looms large. She stands alone at the pulpit of her own chapel, a symbol of a fragile religious peace that she must maintain through constant vigilance. By the end of her first decade on the throne, the transformation is complete. The hesitant young princess has been replaced by a monarch of terrifying intellect and unwavering authority. She sits at the head of her council table, no longer just a figurehead, but the true master of the court. Her advisors have learned that her silence is as dangerous as her speech. The court, once a place of chaos and uncertainty, has been bent to her will. She has secured her position through a combination of mercy and might, ensuring that her name will be remembered for centuries. The Queen has finally taken full control of her destiny. To maintain her grip, the Queen establishes a network of eyes and ears that spans the entire kingdom. No letter is written, no secret whispered, that does not eventually find its way to her desk. This is the birth of the Secret Service, a clandestine operation led by men who owe their lives to her discretion. In the flickering candlelight of the scriptorium, clerks decode ciphers that reveal the hidden intentions of both friend and foe. The Queen understands that information is the true currency of the realm, and she intends to be the wealthiest woman in England. Her chief intelligencer, a man of shadows and sharp wit, meets her in the bowels of the palace. They speak in hushed tones about plots brewing across the channel. The Queen listens, her expression a mask of porcelain calm, while her mind dissects every piece of data. She does not fear the shadows, she has become their architect. Through these covert briefings, she anticipates rebellions before the conspirators have even drawn their swords. Her reign is no longer just about survival. It is about absolute preemption. She is the spider at the center of a silent, invisible web. The arrival of the Spanish ambassador marks a turning point in her foreign policy. Standing before her in the Great Hall, the envoy attempts to intimidate the virgin monarch with threats of armada and invasion. The Queen remains unmoved, her gaze piercing through his posturing. She responds not with anger, but with a cold, calculated logic that leaves the ambassador reeling. She plays the European powers against each other, using marriage negotiations as a shield and a lure. Every word she speaks is a move on a continental chessboard, and she is playing several turns ahead of her rivals. Even within her own walls, the Queen must navigate a sea of ambitious courtiers. The long galleries of the palace are filled with those who seek her favor or plot her downfall. She walks among them, a radiant sun around which all others must orbit. Her presence silences the gossip, turning whispers of treason into murmurs of praise. She uses her court as a theater, where every glance and every gesture is a performance designed to reinforce her dominance. The nobles understand that to be in her presence is a privilege, but to cross her is to invite a slow, cold exile. Power is often found in the smallest of objects. The Queen's hand hovers over the Great Seal, the instrument that validates her laws and sentences her enemies. With a single press of wax, she can elevate a commoner to the peerage or strip a duke of his lands. She does not wield this power lightly. Every document she signs is the result of hours of deliberation. The physical act of sealing a decree is a ritual of finality. In these moments of solitude, the weight of the crown is most tangible, a heavy burden of responsibility that she carries with iron-willed grace. While the court sleeps, the Queen pores over the royal ledgers. She inherited a treasury emptied by her predecessors and a currency debased by corruption. Through meticulous oversight and the appointment of brilliant financiers, she begins to rebuild the nation's wealth. She understands that a monarch without gold is a monarch without teeth. She tracks every pound and shilling, rooting out embezzlement and waste with a cold efficiency that terrifies her auditors. Her Majesty is built upon a foundation of fiscal stability, ensuring that England will never again be a puppet of foreign bankers or greedy lords. To the common people, she must appear as more than a woman. She must be an icon. The Queen commissions portraits that emphasize her majesty and wisdom, carefully controlling her image across the kingdom. These paintings are not mere likenesses. They are propaganda, filled with symbols of her power and divine right to rule. She wears gowns embroidered with eyes and ears, a literal representation of her omnipresence. Through these images, she crafts a legend that will outlive her physical form. The Queen knows that in the eyes of the public, perception is the ultimate reality. Not all challenge her from the shadows. The Duke of Norfolk, emboldened by ancient lineage, dares to question her authority in the council chamber. He speaks of tradition and the natural order of men, implying that her rule is an anomaly. The Queen lets him finish, the silence in the room growing heavy enough to suffocate. When she finally speaks, her voice is a razor. She reminds the Duke that her blood is as royal as his, and her mind far sharper. With a few cold sentences, she strips him of his pride, leaving him a broken man before his peers. Solitude is the constant companion of the sovereign. In the quiet hours of the night, the mask of the Queen slips, revealing the weary woman beneath. The isolation of her position is the price she pays for her total control. She has no equals, only subjects, no friends, only allies. The weight of the kingdom's future rests solely on her shoulders, a burden that would crush a lesser soul. Yet, she does not falter. She finds strength in the silence, drawing upon an internal reservoir of resolve that has been hardened by years of struggle and the constant threat of betrayal. Her safety is maintained by an elite guard, men chosen for their absolute loyalty and lethality. They move like ghosts through the palace, ensuring that no assassin's blade ever reaches its mark. The Queen is never truly alone, surrounded by a shield of iron and steel. This security apparatus is a testament to the dangerous world she inhabits, a world where a crown is a target as much as a prize. As she prepares for the challenges of the next decade, she does so knowing that her life is protected by the very system of control she has spent years perfecting. By the midpoint of her reign, the Queen's influence began to stretch far beyond the stone walls of London. In a dimly lit chamber, She pores over vast maps of the British Isles, marking territories not with armies, but with the names of loyalists. Every shire and coastal town is a node in her growing web. She understands that to control the heart of the kingdom, one must first possess its arteries. Her map room is a sanctuary of strategy, where the geography of power is drawn in ink and determined by the reach of her secret decree, securing her dominance. To govern a kingdom is to master the art of listening to what is left unsaid. In the grand whispering galleries of the palace, the queen's ears are everywhere. She has cultivated a network of informants who blend into the very architecture of the court. Pages, maids, and even noblemen act as her vessels of information. Every hushed conversation behind a tapestry or shared secret in a corridor eventually finds its way to her. Knowledge is her most potent currency, and she spends it wisely to dismantle her enemies before they even realize they have been discovered. The strength of a crown is often measured in gold, and the queen's control over the royal treasury is absolute. She understands that loyalty can be bought, and rebellion is often starved into submission. In the vaults beneath the palace, her master of coin tallies the wealth of a nation under her watchful gaze. It is not merely about hoarding riches, but about the strategic distribution of favor. By controlling the flow of commerce and the heavy taxation of the defiant, she ensures that the machinery of the state remains well-oiled and entirely subservient to her royal will. International diplomacy is a dance of shadows, and the queen is its most adept performer. She receives foreign envoys in halls designed to intimidate, where the weight of British history hangs heavy in the air. Each diplomat brings a message from a rival king, yet she reads between the lines of their flowery prose. She balances alliances with the precision of an alchemist, knowing that today's ally is tomorrow's rival. Through subtle threats and grand promises, she keeps the powers of Europe at bay, ensuring that her island nation remains an impenetrable fortress of political intrigue. The church remains a powerful pillar of society, and the queen knows that to control the people, she must influence their faith. She holds private audiences with high-ranking clerics, ensuring their sermons align with the stability of her reign. The scent of incense and the sound of low chanting fill the chapel as she negotiates the delicate balance between divine right and political necessity. She does not seek to be a saint, but she will not allow the pulpit to become a platform for sedition. By binding the cross to the crown, she secures a spiritual mandate. Deep within the palace archives, the queen's cryptographers work tirelessly to break the codes of her enemies. She understands that an intercepted letter is more valuable than 1,000 swords. When a secret missive from a disgruntled duke is finally deciphered, it reveals a plot to undermine her authority in the north. The queen does not panic. She simply prepares. She uses the information to lay a trap, turning the traitor's own words against him. In this world of hidden meanings, her ability to decode the truth is what keeps her one step ahead. In the damp, cold dungeons of the tower, the queen confronts those who dared to defy her. This is not a place of public spectacle, but of quiet, terrifying resolution. She does not need to see blood to exert her power. The mere presence of the iron bars and the weight of the silence are enough to break most wills. She offers mercy in exchange for information, a bargain that many find impossible to refuse. Here, in the belly of the fortress, she reminds her prisoners that while the crown is heavy, the hand that wears it is unyielding. Despite the hidden dangers, the queen must occasionally appear before her court to maintain the myth of her invincibility. During a grand banquet, she sits at the head of a long table surrounded by the very nobility she seeks to control. Every smile is a mask, and every toast is a test of loyalty. She watches the faces of her subjects, looking for the flicker of a gaze or a hesitant word. By projecting an image of absolute calm and regal grace, she reinforces her position as the undisputed center of the British universe, the sun around which they revolve. When the candles burn low and the court has finally retired, the Queen returns to her private chambers. The weight of the crown is literal and metaphorical as she removes the heavy jewels of her office. In the solitude of the night, the facade of the untouchable monarch slips, revealing the exhaustion of a woman who carries the fate of a nation on her shoulders. She reflects on the sacrifices made and the lives manipulated to maintain order. It is a lonely existence, defined by the constant vigilance required to keep a kingdom from falling into chaos and ruin. As a new decade dawns, the Queen looks toward the future, knowing that her legacy must be secured. She begins to mentor a young protege, a child of royal blood who will one day inherit the system she has built. She teaches the child that to rule is to be eternally watchful, and that the shadows are as important as the light. The cycle of power continues, a never-ending game of chess where the board is a country and the pieces are human lives. The Queen stands at the window, watching the morning mist roll over London, ready for the next challenge. The Queen leads the young protege, Prince Richard, into the heart of the great council chamber, where the air is thick with the scent of beeswax and old paper. The lords of the realm stand in stony silence, their eyes darting between the aging monarch and the child who represents her future. She does not introduce him as a boy, but as the next instrument of the crown's will. She watches the reactions of her advisors, noting which men bow with genuine respect and which hide their ambition behind a mask of feigned loyalty. This is his first lesson. The court is a stage where every movement is rehearsed and every silence is a weapon. Beneath the stone floors and behind the heavy velvet tapestries of the palace, the Queen reveals the secret conduits of information that have sustained her reign. She takes the child through a hidden passage, showing him the ears of the palace. Narrow gaps in the masonry, where one can overhear the whispers of the kitchens and the conspiracies of the guest quarters. She explains that a ruler's greatest asset is not an army, but the truth spoken in private. The child touches the cold, damp stone, realizing for the first time that the palace is a living, breathing entity that keeps its secrets locked away in the dark. An envoy from the Spanish court arrives, his boots clicking rhythmically against the marble floor as he approaches the throne. The Queen sits motionless, her fingers interlaced, while the young prince stands just behind her shoulder. The ambassador speaks of peace and trade, but his eyes constantly stray toward the child, assessing the strength of the lineage. The Queen remains silent, allowing the tension to fill the room like a physical weight. She whispers a single question to the prince, testing his ability to discern the lie hidden within the envoy's flowery rhetoric. In this court, even a greeting is a tactical maneuver. Power is not merely in titles, but in the clinking of gold and the ink of ledgers. The Queen takes the prince to the royal treasury, a vaulted stone chamber where the wealth of a nation is meticulously recorded. She shows him that every ship in the harbor and every bushel of grain in the provinces is a thread she can pull. She teaches him that a king who cannot count his own coin is a king who will eventually be bought by his enemies. The light from a single candle reflects off stacks of silver, casting a cold, metallic glow on their serious faces as they study the books. In the dim light of the war room, a massive map of the known world is spread across an oak table, its edges curled and worn. The queen uses a long wooden rod to point at the borders where the empire is most vulnerable. She explains to the prince that the land is a living thing that must be tended and defended. She speaks of the alliances that are forged in blood and those that are bought with promises. The child watches as she moves small pewter markers across the parchment, realizing that the people of these lands are merely pieces in a game of global strategy. A subtle shift in the courtly atmosphere warns the queen of a brewing discontent among the northern lords. They gather in small groups, their voices dropping whenever her guards pass. Instead of a direct confrontation, she sends the young prince to deliver a decree of land reform, using the child's innocence as a shield against their anger. The lords are forced to bow to the boy, their pride wounded, but their hands tied by tradition. The queen watches from a high gallery, a ghost-like figure in the shadows, ensuring that the hierarchy she built remains unshaken by their petty grievances. Late into the night, the library of the palace remains illuminated by a single flickering candle. The prince sits surrounded by ancient scrolls and bound volumes, tasked with translating a series of secret correspondences from a previous century. The queen sits nearby, her eyes closed but her mind sharp, listening as he reads the encoded messages. She explains that history is not a record of what happened, but a record of what the survivors wanted people to believe. Every word written on these pages is a lesson in how to craft a narrative that will endure long after they are both gone. Age is a predator that even a queen cannot banish. In the solitude of her private chambers, her hands tremble as she adjusts her heavy silk collar. The prince watches from the doorway, seeing for the first time the fragility beneath the iron mask of sovereignty. She catches his gaze in the silver mirror and does not look away, instead beckoning him closer. She tells him that a ruler's greatest fear is not death, but the chaos that follows a weak succession. Her voice is a raspy whisper, but her eyes remain as sharp as a falcon's, demanding that he learn the strength of vulnerability. The palace gardens are a labyrinth of secrets, where the morning mist clings to the hedges like a shroud. The queen and the prince walk slowly through the gray light, meeting a hooded informant near a headless stone statue. No names are exchanged, only a small scrap of paper that will decide the fate of a rebellious earl. The queen teaches the child that nature is the best place to hide a conversation, as the wind and the birds provide the only witness. In this muted world of gray and green, the prince learns that the most important decisions are often made in the damp cold of dawn. The dawn of a new state ceremony arrives, and the queen prepares to present her vision of the future to the entire court. She dons her heaviest robes, the weight of the fabric a physical manifestation of her responsibilities. The prince stands by her side, now taller and more confident, his gaze reflecting the steel she has forged within him. As the great doors of the cathedral begin to open, the queen takes a deep breath, smoothing the parchment of her speech. She knows that this day marks the beginning of the end of her reign and the true commencement of his. The cycle is complete. The heavy oak doors of the cathedral swing wide, revealing a cavernous interior illuminated by thousands of flickering candles. The court stands in silence, a sea of velvet and fur, their eyes fixed on the queen. She walks with a deliberate, slow pace, the rhythmic thud of her staff against the stone floor echoing through the high vaulted ceiling. Beside her, the prince matches her stride, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. Every noble present understands the gravity of this moment. It is not merely a ceremony, but a calculated display of enduring power and the passing of a legacy. As they approach the high altar, the queen's eyes sweep across the faces of the great council. These are the men who once doubted her, who plotted in the corridors of her childhood home. She sees the fear hidden behind their masks of fealty. She has outlived her enemies and outmaneuvered her rivals. And now, as she nears the end of her journey, she feels the weight of the crown pressing more heavily than ever before. Every step is a testament to the iron will that has kept the kingdom from fracturing during the long years of her solitary rule. The prince stops just before the dais, turning to face the assembly. He has spent years in the queen's shadow, learning the language of silence and the art of the hidden threat. Now, he stands in his own light. The nobility notes the way he carries himself, not with the brash arrogance of youth, but with the cold, calculating precision of his mother. He is the weapon she has spent a lifetime tempering. And as he looks out over the lords and ladies, it is clear that he is ready to strike should any hand be raised against their house. The queen ascends the final steps to the throne and turns. She produces a scroll of thick, aged parchment, the edges curled and darkened by time. Her voice, though aged, carries to the furthest corners of the hall with a resonance that commands absolute attention. She begins to read the chronicle of her reign, not of her triumphs, but of the sacrifices required to maintain order. She speaks of the sleepless nights, the difficult betrayals, and the heavy price of peace. The court listens, mesmerized by the raw honesty of a woman who has nothing left to prove to anyone. In the shadows of the choir stalls, the secret keepers and shadow players watch. These are the men who have served as the queen's eyes and ears for decades, the invisible network that kept her informed of every whisper of treason. They see the transition happening and know their roles will soon change. They exchange glances of silent understanding. Their loyalty is to the crown, not just the wearer. They see in the prince a continuation of the stability they have fought to protect, and they prepare to shift their allegiance to the new sun rising over the horizon. The queen pauses her reading, her gaze landing on a particularly defiant duke in the front row. The silence stretches, becoming uncomfortable, a physical weight in the room. She does not speak, but the intensity of her stare says everything. The duke, a man who has led armies, eventually lowers his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. It is a final, wordless victory for the queen. She shows the court that even as she prepares to step aside, her power remains absolute. She is the architect of this court, and she will not see its foundations shaken. The prince steps forward and places his hand on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. This is the moment the court has waited for, the public acknowledgement of his succession. He does not speak yet, but his presence is a loud declaration. He is the shield and the sword of the queen's vision. The transition is seamless, a masterclass in political maneuvering. The nobles realize that any hope of a power vacuum upon the queen's passing has been systematically dismantled. The structure of the government she built is too strong, and its new guardian is already in place and fully prepared. The queen reaches into the folds of her robes and produces the great seal of the realm. It is a heavy, ancient object, the physical embodiment of the law and the queen's will. She holds it out toward the prince, her arm steady despite her age. The metal glints in the candlelight, reflecting the history of the kings and queens who held it before her. As the prince reaches out to take it, the court breathes as one. The transfer of the seal is the legal finality of her reign's transition, a moment captured in the amber of history. As the prince takes the seal, the queen steps back, moving out of the primary light of the altar. She retreats into the periphery, becoming an observer of her own legacy. The prince turns to the court and begins his first address. his voice steady and cold. He speaks of continuity, of strength, and of the unwavering pursuit of the kingdom's interests. The lords realize that the queen's influence will not vanish. It has simply been distilled into the man standing before them. The mystery of her control has reached its zenith, ensuring her survival through her heir. The ceremony concludes with a low, mournful chant from the monks in the rafters. The queen turns away from the light and begins her slow walk back through the side aisles, disappearing into the darkness of the cathedral's architecture. She does not look back. Behind her, the prince leads the court out into the world, the new center of gravity. She has fulfilled her purpose, weaving a tapestry of control so tight that it will hold long after she is gone. In the shadows, she finds the peace of a woman who has successfully cheated time and destiny. The Queen Mother retreats into the labyrinthine heart of the royal palace, where the cold stone walls seem to exhale the secrets of centuries. Her path is lit by a single, flickering torch, held by a silent attendant. In these narrow corridors, away from the prying eyes of the court, her true work begins. She moves with a deceptive stillness, her heavy velvet robes dragging softly against the flagstones. Though she has handed the public scepter to her son, her grip on the internal machinery of the state remains absolute, manifesting in the quiet orders she whispers into the darkness. In her private study, a room rarely entered by any but herself, the queen sits before a massive oak desk laden with encrypted ledgers and wax-sealed letters. Here, the map of her influence is laid bare. She breaks the seal of a report from the northern borders, her eyes scanning the ink with a predator's focus. The transition of power is a delicate illusion she has crafted. While the prince signs the decrees, she is the one who decides what they contain. Every alliance and every betrayal is documented in these pages, the true ledger of a kingdom's soul. Outside the private sanctum, the great hall echoes with the prince's first independent decree. He sits upon the throne, bathed in the morning light that streams through the stained glass, unaware that his mother watches from the gallery above, concealed by a heavy tapestry. She observes the reactions of the nobles, the subtle shifts in their posture, the whispered asides between rivals. She has taught him well, but his independence is merely the final thread in her weave. He acts as she intended, a puppet who believes he has finally cut his strings, providing the court with a fresh face while the old regime persists. A memory surfaces as she watches him. 30 years ago, in this very hall, she had stood where he stands now, navigating a sea of daggers disguised as smiles. She recalls the exact moment she realized that power is not found in the crown, but in the information one holds over those who wear it. The flashback reveals her younger self, standing amidst a group of gray-bearded advisors, her expression unreadable. She had learned early that to rule is to be invisible, to guide the hand of the powerful without ever appearing to touch it herself. Late into the night, the queen summons her most trusted spy, a man who has lived his life in the periphery of history. They meet in the royal library, surrounded by the scent of old vellum and dust. No words are wasted. He presents a list of names, those who might challenge the prince's transition. She reviews it with a cold, analytical gaze. Each name represents a potential fracture in her design. She marks a few with a charcoal pencil, a silent sentence of exile or social ruin, ensuring the foundation of the new reign is cleared of all rot. Rumors begin to circulate through the lower courts and the kitchens, spreading like a slow-moving fog. The courtiers speak of the queen's retirement, with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. They wonder if she has truly stepped back, or if she is simply becoming a ghost, that haunts the halls. The queen hears these whispers through her network of servants. She finds satisfaction in their uncertainty. Fear, she knows, is more effective than love when it comes to maintaining order. As long as they wonder where she is, they will remain on their best behavior. She descends into the royal archives, a subterranean vault where the history of the dynasty is written in blood and ink. Here, she seeks the ancient precedents she needs to justify her continued influence. Her fingers trace the embossed seals on scrolls that haven't been opened for a century. The air is thick with the weight of the past. She is looking for the king's silence, an ancient law that allows the mother of a sovereign to act as the ultimate arbiter in times of transition. Finding it, she smiles, a rare, grim expression of triumph. A foreign envoy arrives under the cover of a storm, seeking an audience not with the king, but with the woman who truly holds the keys to the kingdom. They meet in a small, damp chapel on the palace grounds. The envoy offers a secret pact, trade routes in exchange for the queen's influence over her son's foreign policy. She listens to the rain drumming against the stained glass, her face a mask of stone. She negotiates with a ruthlessness that her son has yet to master, securing the kingdom's prosperity while further tightening her own grip on the prince's external affairs. From the highest balcony of the North Tower, the Queen Mother watches the sunrise over London. The city is a sprawling organism of timber and stone, waking up to a new era. To the commoners, the change in leadership is a matter of coins and celebrations. To her, it is a game of chess played on a board the size of a country. The wind pulls at her veil, but she remains motionless, a sentinel of the old order. She knows that as long as she stands here, the transition will be seamless, her invisible hand guiding the city into the future. She returns to her chambers and picks up a heavy iron key, the one that unlocks the cabinet containing the true history of her reign, the records of the lives she has broken and the peace she has bought. She realizes that her influence is no longer just a series of actions. It has become the very structure of the court. The prince will rule, but he will rule within the walls she has built. She closes the cabinet and locks it, the sound echoing through the room. Her legacy is not her name on a monument, but the silence of a kingdom that functions exactly as she designed. With the cabinet locked, the queen moves through the drafty corridors of the palace, her silhouette lengthening against the cold stone walls. The heavy iron key weighs in her palm, a physical manifestation of the secrets she carries. The palace is silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of her heels and the distant, muffled calls of the night watch. She walks not as a guest or a resident, but as the master of a complex machine. Every shadow she passes seems to bow, acknowledging the invisible threads she has woven through every hall and chamber to ensure the monarchy's survival. The following morning, the Privy Council assembles in the Grand Chamber. The Queen's chair at the head of the long oak table remains empty, yet her presence is more stifling than if she were seated there. The ministers, men of high birth and higher ambition, exchange guarded looks. They speak in hushed tones, aware that the very air they breathe is filtered through her influence. Even in her absence, the agenda they follow was written by her hand. They are no longer independent advisors, but cogs in a mechanism she perfected over decades of calculated maneuvers and silent observations. The prince begins his duties, meeting with the high-ranking officials the queen handpicked for his service. As he listens to their reports on trade and border security, a chilling realization settles over him. Every choice he is presented with has been pre-vetted. Every problem has a predetermined solution already mapped out by his mother. He is the face of the realm, but the queen is its mind. The bureaucracy she built functions with a terrifying efficiency that leaves him no room to stray. He is a king in training, yet he feels like a prisoner within his own sovereign rights. In the secluded corners of the palace gardens, where the morning mist clings to the hedges like a shroud, the queen meets with her primary informant. This man, a shadow himself, provides her with the pulse of the city and the whispers of the docks. Dissent is a weed she has spent a lifetime pulling, and she knows that even the smallest sprout of rebellion can compromise the peace she has sacrificed everything to maintain. She listens without interruption, her face a mask of granite, absorbing the intelligence that allows her to remain 3 steps ahead of any potential rival. The queen enters the royal archives, a subterranean vault filled with the smell of old ink and dry paper. Here, she oversees the chief scribe as he records the official history of the last decade. With a single word, she can erase a failure or amplify a victory. The truth is a malleable substance in her hands, to be shaped for the benefit of the crown's legacy. She watches the quill move across the parchment, ensuring that the narrative passed down to future generations is one of unwavering stability and divine order. Regardless of the bloodless sacrifices made in the shadows, a royal portraitist is summoned to capture the queen's likeness for the Great Hall. As he prepares his oils, she instructs him sternly. She is not to be painted as a mother, nor as a woman of flesh and bone, but as an eternal monument of the state. She demands a portrait that radiates power through stillness and wisdom through severity. She wants her subjects to look upon her image and feel the weight of an unshakable history. The artist, sensing her uncompromising will, shifts his palette to darker, more regal tones, capturing the essence of a ruler who has transcended humanity. Later that week, the prince attempts to deviate from his mother's established trade policy, seeking to ease taxes on the merchant guilds. He is immediately met with a wall of polite but firm resistance from the treasury. Every clerk and magistrate cites a precedent she established, or a secret treaty she signed years prior. The bureaucracy is a labyrinth of her making, and the prince finds himself lost in its turnings. He realizes that her power isn't just in the laws she passed, but in the very habits of the men who run the kingdom. She has automated her authority. As night falls over the capital, the queen stands on her balcony, looking out over the flickering lights of London. The city is quiet, its inhabitants sleeping under the protection of the order she enforced. She knows that this peace is fragile, held together by the fear and respect she has cultivated. Below, the Thames flows like liquid silver in the moonlight, a silent witness to the centuries of power struggles. She feels a cold satisfaction, knowing that even after she is gone, the structure she has built will endure, forcing the world to move according to her design. A courier arrives from a powerful foreign empire, bearing a letter sealed with heavy wax. Surprisingly, the missive is addressed directly to the Queen Mother, bypassing the prince entirely. The foreign court knows where the true center of gravity lies in the British court. They seek her counsel and her blessing for a new alliance, recognizing that her influence extends far beyond the borders of her own island. She breaks the seal with a steady hand, her eyes scanning the lines for any hint of weakness. Even the world outside her palace walls recognizes the queen's silent, absolute control. The queen joins the prince for a formal dinner, the long table a vast expanse of polished wood between them. The clatter of silver on porcelain is the only sound in the cavernous room. She watches him, noting his frustration and his growing realization of his limitations. Finally, she speaks, her voice a calm, low resonance that commands the room. She offers him a single piece of advice, a strategic move concerning the northern lords, that sounds like a suggestion but carries the weight of an absolute command. She is reinforcing her psychological grip, ensuring the prince remains her ultimate masterpiece. Following the dinner, the prince retreats to his private study, the weight of the queen's suggestion pressing upon him like a physical burden. He stares at the maps of the northern territories, realizing that her strategic insight into the lord's grievances was far more precise than his own advisor's reports. Every move he imagined making had already been anticipated and neutralized by her quiet command. The realization that he is merely a figurehead in a play she has already written begins to settle in his gut, a cold and hollow sensation that mirrors the silence of the drafty castle stone. While the prince broods, the queen descends into the lower sanctums of the palace to meet with her network of shadows, informants who operate in the margins of the court. These men and women, invisible to the nobility, provide the raw intelligence that fuels her mastery. She listens as they describe the growing unrest among the northern lords, confirming that her calculated advice to the prince will spark exactly the reaction she desires. Her control is not just over the throne, but over the very flow of information that defines the reality of the kingdom. A web spun in silence. Desperate to assert his own agency, the prince arranges a clandestine meeting with Lord Hastings, a powerful northern dissident, in the palace gardens under the cover of a thick mist. He hopes to forge a direct alliance, bypassing his mother's influence. The air is damp and heavy as they speak in hushed tones, the prince offering concessions that he believes will secure the lord's loyalty. He feels a brief surge of hope, a flicker of independence in the gloom. However, the ancient trees seem to have ears, and the very statues of his ancestors appear to be watching him with disapproval. The prince's attempt at rebellion is short-lived. Before Lord Hastings can even leave the palace grounds, he is intercepted by the queen's personal guard. There is no struggle, only the quiet, efficient application of authority. The prince watches from a high window, his heart sinking as he sees his potential ally led away into the darkness of the dungeons. The queen's hand is everywhere, reaching through the stone and the shadow to snatch away any hope of autonomy. He understands now that his secrets are her property, and his allies are merely targets she has yet to strike. The following morning, the prince confronts the queen in her private chapel, where she sits in prayer amidst the scent of frankincense and old stone. He demands to know why his guests are being detained, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. She does not look up immediately, allowing the silence of the sacred space to amplify his agitation. When she finally turns, her gaze is not one of anger, but of a mother disappointed in a child who has failed a simple lesson. She reminds him that the safety of the crown requires the removal of all variables. The queen stands and approaches a small wooden casket on a side table, producing a stack of intercepted letters. She begins to read them aloud, each one a record of the prince's secret communications with various lords and foreign dignitaries. The prince is paralyzed as his own words are turned against him, revealed to be clumsy and transparent in the face of her sophisticated surveillance. She shows him that she has not only read his letters, but has already drafted responses to them, effectively taking over his identity in the eyes of his allies. His spirit begins to buckle under the weight of her omniscience. Broken and isolated, the prince wanders the castle battlements as a cold wind whips off the sea. The vast kingdom he is supposed to rule stretches out before him, but it feels like a prison. He looks down at the crashing waves below, reflecting on how his mother has systematically dismantled his confidence and his connections. He is a king in name only, a puppet whose strings are pulled by a master who knows his every thought before he thinks it. The mist rolls in, swallowing the landscape, mirroring the confusion and hopelessness that now define his existence in her shadow. The time for the grand court session arrives, an event intended to show the unity of the realm. The prince sits upon the throne, but the Queen Mother stands directly beside him, her hand resting on the back of the chair. It is a subtle but unmistakable gesture of ownership. The courtiers and ambassadors bow, but their eyes frequently drift from the prince to the queen, seeking her reaction before they speak. The atmosphere is thick with tension and the smell of melting wax. The prince remains silent, his posture stiff and unnatural, as he performs the role she has meticulously rehearsed for him. The northern lords, once so defiant, are led into the hall to swear their fealty. They kneel before the throne, but as they recite their oaths, they look directly into the queen's eyes. They recognize the true source of power in the room. She nods slightly at each one, a silent acknowledgement of their submission. The prince watches this exchange, feeling the last vestiges of his authority evaporate. He is merely the vessel through which she speaks, the mask she wears to rule the kingdom. The lords rise, their spirits as subdued as his own, fully integrated into her grand design. Late that night, the queen retires to her private chambers. The day's successes settled comfortably around her. She stands before a large, darkened portrait of the late king, her husband. In the low light, her reflection in the glass merges with his painted features. She has preserved his legacy, but on her own terms, turning his son into a masterpiece of controlled ambition. She blows out the final candle, plunging the room into darkness, satisfied that her grip on the court is absolute and her son is finally exactly where she needs him to be, utterly dependent and perfectly silent. The dawn brings a new era of calculated stability across the realm. In her solar, the Queen Mother does not rest on her laurels. Instead, she sits at her heavy oak desk, the scratch of her quill the only sound in the room. She pens a series of directives to the northern lords, her hand steady and her commands absolute. Each wax seal she presses onto the parchment is a physical manifestation of her grip on the realm. No longer is she merely the widow of a king. She is the architect of a new order, one where every stone is laid according to her design. The great council gathers under the vaulted ceilings of Westminster. The young king sits upon the throne, the heavy crown appearing almost too large for his brow. Beside him, slightly recessed into the shadows but undeniably present, stands the Queen Mother. Her hand rests lightly on the back of the throne, a gesture of support that feels more like a tether. As the lords debate, the king looks to her before every word, his eyes searching for the subtle nod or the slight frown that dictates his every response. The council watches, realizing that the voice of the king is merely the echo of the queen. Beneath the towering arches of the cathedral, far from the prying eyes of the queen's guards, a group of disgruntled nobles meets in the damp gloom. They speak in hushed tones, their breath misting in the cold air. They whisper of a king who is but a ghost in his own palace, and a queen who has usurped the natural order of the court. Yet, even here, surrounded by holy stone, they glance over their shoulders. The queen's influence is a silent fog that permeates every corner of the capital, and the fear of her network of informants chills their treasonous hearts more than the winter air. In the labyrinthine depths of the palace library, the queen meets with her master of whispers. The room is filled with the scent of old leather and drying ink. Reports from across the kingdom are laid out on a table, a map of secrets and shifting loyalties. She listens intently as he details the movements of the northern lords and the grumblings of the common folk. To her, information is the most potent currency of the realm. She processes each detail with a cold, analytical mind, weaving these fragments of truth into a net that will ensure no one escapes her reach. A rare moment of friction occurs within the royal chambers. The young king, momentarily emboldened by a sympathetic advisor, hesitates to sign a decree that would strip a loyal house of their lands. He holds the quill suspended above the parchment, his hand trembling. The Queen Mother approaches him, her movement silent and predatory. She does not raise her voice. She simply leans in, her eyes locking onto his with a terrifying intensity. She speaks of duty, legacy, and the consequences of weakness. The boy's resolve collapses under her gaze, and he signs the document, his spirit further eroded by her overwhelming will. As the official coronation ceremony approaches, the palace is a hive of activity. In the vaults, the master of the jewel house polishes the imperial crown under the queen's watchful eye. The gold glints in the torchlight, but the queen sees it not as a symbol of her son's glory, but as the final seal on her own authority. She reaches out and touches the cold metal, her fingers tracing the gems. She has navigated the treacherous waters of widowhood and political isolation to reach this moment. The crown is a heavy burden, one she is more than willing to bear through her son's proxy. A foreign ambassador from the French court arrives, bearing gifts and seeking an audience with the new king. He is ushered into the presence chamber, where he performs his bows and recites his rehearsed greetings. However, he quickly notices that the king's responses are rehearsed, and his eyes constantly drift to the Queen Mother. The ambassador, a seasoned diplomat, realizes that the rumors reaching Paris were true. The true power in England does not wear the crown. She stands beside it. He adjusts his strategy instantly, realizing that to win the king's favor, he must first satisfy the queen's ambitions. When the court finally sleeps, the queen walks the long, echoing corridors of the palace alone. Her shadow stretches across the stone floors, momentarily merging with the figures in the ancient tapestries that line the walls. These woven histories tell of kings who fell and queens who were forgotten, but she intends to be the exception. She moves with a quiet, purposeful grace, her footsteps the only heartbeat of the sleeping giant that is the monarchy. She is the ghost that haunts the halls of power, a living reminder that the realm is held together by her singular, unrelenting will. In the privacy of his bedchamber, the young king sits by a dying fire, surrounded by the finest luxuries the world can offer. Yet, his expression is one of profound isolation. He is a king in name, but a prisoner in practice. His life a series of scripted moments orchestrated by his mother. He looks at his own reflection in a silver basin, seeing a stranger staring back, a puppet whose strings are pulled by the woman he both loves and fears. The weight of his golden cage is more suffocating than the heaviest armor, a silent tragedy hidden behind the walls of his mother's triumph. The Queen Mother stands upon the high balcony as a storm gathers on the horizon. The wind whips her dark veil around her, but she remains as still as a statue. Below her lies the kingdom she has tamed, a landscape of loyalties she has carefully cultivated, and dissent she has ruthlessly suppressed. She has secured the future of her dynasty, turning her son into the perfect instrument of her rule. As the first drop of rain falls, she knows that while the weather may change, her control over the court is as unyielding as the ancient stones of the palace itself. As the deluge begins, the Queen Mother retreats from the balcony into the cavernous Great Hall. The heavy oak doors groan shut, sealing out the tempest but trapping the mounting tension within the stone walls. Her footsteps echo on the cold marble, a rhythmic reminder of her steady, unrelenting presence. She has survived decades of political warfare, and every scar on her soul is matched by a victory for the crown. In the flickering torchlight, she looks not like a woman, but like an ancient force of nature, poised to maintain order whatever the cost. In the dim recesses of the council chamber, the Queen Mother meets her shadow cabinet. These are the men who operate in the periphery, spies, whisperers, and loyalists who owe their status entirely to her favor. They do not speak of laws or justice. They speak of leverage and secrets. Each report brought to her is a thread in the vast web she has spun across the British Isles. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and old ink. Here, in the silence, the real fate of the kingdom is decided, far from the public eyes of the Parliament. The young king sits at a heavy mahogany desk, the weight of the crown appearing almost physical upon his narrow shoulders. Behind him, the Queen Mother stands as an immovable guardian, her hand resting lightly but firmly on the back of his chair. He signs the latest series of royal decrees with a trembling hand, his eyes scanning documents he barely understands. She has crafted him into the perfect figurehead, a vessel for her own iron will. To the world, he is the sovereign, but to the court, he is the echo of her commanding voice. Miles away, in the damp isolation of a northern fortress, a disgraced duke stares through iron bars at the storm-lashed moors. He was once a powerful voice of dissent, a man who dared to challenge the Queen Mother's influence. Now, he is a ghost in her machine, his titles stripped and his supporters scattered. This is the fate of those who underestimate her reach. The Queen Mother does not need to spill blood to destroy an enemy. She simply erases them from the narrative of power, leaving them to rot in the silence of history. The Queen Mother spreads a massive hand-drawn map of the realm across the strategy table. The parchment is yellowed and worn at the edges, detailing every duchy, port, and border. She moves small lead figurines representing the great houses, repositioning them like pieces on a chessboard. Each move is calculated to maintain a delicate balance of power that favors the throne. There is no room for sentiment in her geography, only the cold reality of tactical dominance. She views the kingdom not as a collection of people, but as a territory to be managed. In the private royal archives, the Queen Mother personally oversees the filing of the year's correspondence. She holds a wax seal over a candle, the flame casting a warm, flickering light on her focused features. Some letters are destined for the vaults, while others are fed into the hearth, their secrets turning to gray ash. By controlling the records, she controls the legacy of her reign. She understands that history is not what happened, but what is written down. Her hand ensures that only the version of events that strengthens the dynasty will survive. A grand banquet is held in the palace, but the atmosphere is devoid of celebration. The nobility sit in rows, their faces illuminated by hundreds of candles that struggle against the encroaching gloom of the hall. Conversation is hushed, a low murmur that dies down whenever the Queen Mother glances toward a table. No one dares to speak out of turn or display unvetted ambition. This is the court she has built, a place of absolute refinement and absolute fear. Every guest knows that their presence at the table is a privilege she can revoke at any moment. Late into the night, the Queen Mother descends into the royal crypt, where the stone effigies of past kings and queens lie in eternal repose. She walks among her ancestors, her lantern casting long shadows that dance against the vaulted ceiling. She speaks to no one, yet she feels the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. She is the bridge between the glory of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Her rule is an act of preservation, a desperate and beautiful attempt to keep the flame of the monarchy burning in a darkening world, at the lightning that illuminates the rain-drenched gardens. She is tired, the years of manipulation and vigilance etched into the fine lines of her face. Yet, her posture remains perfect. She has given everything to this court: her youth, her mercy, and her peace. As the wind howls, she remains the anchor of the kingdom, the only thing standing between order and chaos. The final image of the era is defined not by the king, but by the silhouette of the Queen Mother against the palace windows as the sun begins to break through the clouds. The storm has passed, leaving the stone walls glistening and the air clear. Her work is complete. The court is pacified, the dynasty is secure, and her son sits firmly upon the throne. She has become a legend, a shadow that will haunt the corridors of British history for generations. The queen who controlled the court fades into the twilight, her legacy carved into the very foundations of the empire.